All right, welcome to our podcast, Basement Tales, which we tell stories about our roadmap and our path to riches in real estate. We've got some stories to tell, and today it's the evil lawyer day, which makes me very happy. I play an evil lawyer in real life and personally, but working with Sam and Charlie, we've run into some very interesting, very questionable circumstances. And so I've come up with a name for this. And in telling you this, of course, I am a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. We're talking about generalities. Can we get some kind of small print disclaimer sign I could hold up? That would be good. But I sort of, after working at this a while, I sort of came up with shorthand for when we run across these. I call them SSPs, and they're very close to each other. There's sort of different gradations, and to decide what you run into. Anyway, people in real estate, you will find a lot of just out and out scams. So that's the first S.
What's a scam?
And
Something
that's
that's
not
not real. Something that's what is a scam?
anything that's fraudulent, fake, clearly illegal.
I got you.
That's what
Okay.
I would consider a scam. You're trying to rip somebody off. A scheme is where that's the second S, where somebody has come up with a plan that they think maybe, well, I shouldn't use the word plan. They've come up with an idea that they think if I do the following things, through this process I've come up with, I can make money. And it's a little bit on the edge of maybe a little scammy. In fact, maybe they get sued and get in trouble for it. On the other hand, maybe it's just a good scheme that they've created a new way to make money at real estate, or mashed a couple things together to make money, and those can be okay.
That's an
And then, of
overlapping.
course,
They have an overlapping Venn diagram there. The circles can be a scheme can be a scam, but sometimes a scheme's
yeah,
just a scheme.
yeah, and you could think of it as the color spectrum. Roy G. Biv. You go from one set of the colors to the other, and they kind of blend together at certain places.
Or
But here's this
homes.
Venn diagram's
Homes.
good.
Don't forget homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So the schemes are kind of, well, if it's a good scheme, then maybe it's a little closer to the final thing, which is a plan. I like plans because I'm a lawyer and I don't want to get sued, and I don't want you guys to get sued. A plan is where you've put together a good business idea, and hopefully you execute it, you make money. The other party may be very happy. They've sold their property, or you've come up with a creative way to deal with a property problem. So that's a plan. And and again, you may start with a scam, but realize, well, wait a second, I don't want to, break the law. Let me fix the problems with this. If I disclose this, maybe that's okay. Now maybe you're into scheme territory, and then you make it really good. So this is obviously legal, and I fixed all of those scammy things and schemy things, so I'm not ripping somebody off, or I'm not going to get in a regulatory problem. And boy, have we run into it. I mean, I came up with this shorthand. We have run into a lot of situations where I'm not sure what they are when I first hear about them. Is it a scam, a scheme, or a plan? So I think, Charlie, maybe you or Sam can tell, what's a good scam you've heard of? And by good, I mean like, oh my gosh, that was a scam.
All right. So this is going to be my favorite podcast of all time because I'm going to kick this off with two SSPs. The first one involves a couple of title companies where there's this business line called wholesaling. And basically what wholesaling is you put a house under contract and you assign it to a cash buyer and you make this thing called a contract assignment fee. Well, if you, let's say you put a house under contract for $300,000, it's worth $500,000, but you wholesale it for $325,000 to the cash buyer and you get a $25,000 assignment fee. Well, the way it's supposed to be done is that the $25,000 has to be put on a HUD-1 or the closing statement, and the title company has to send out what's called a 1099 to the wholesaler for that contract assignment fee because the wholesaler is making $25,000.
You're disclosing everything.
Wait a
The
second, the
settlement
cash-
statement discloses all the transaction fully.
Right.
So that the buyer and the seller know where the money's coming and going.
Right. And here's
That's the kind of question I would get as a lawyer. But you're saying that the cash buyer can't just get me some bundles of $100 bills that add up to 25 and slide that across the table? And
No,
the answer is no. That's a tax scam. So
right.
that
you
is a
can't do
Right.
tax
But
that.
scam, yeah.
that's exactly what this is this is a tax
Oh.
scam. And so what the wholesaler is doing through the title company is instead of putting a $25,000 contract assignment fee, they're just putting a $25,000 loan payback. So it's if that $25,000 is showing up as a repayment of a loan that never existed.
So there's no reporting requirement, you're saying.
Right. So because the loan is getting paid back in its principal nature, there's no interest being reported. The principal is just getting paid back. Thus, that's not really a taxable event. So we've seen that a few times. And that leads me up to my second SSP, which is a little bit more, well, I guess this is kind of deliberate, but this is a little bit more deliberate than the wholesaler SSP. And this is where we've run into a certain title company in Washington, D.C. We cannot name names because, you know, Ed being a lawyer might get me in trouble. And I don't certainly want to get our podcast in trouble. Well, this one time
I need a bleep button over here. I'm remote today. I need a button to like shut off the audio when you say
All right,
something we can't say.
Well, I won't name names. So we ran into this person, and we ran into a couple of bad dealings with this person on some of our hard money deals, which got us into this research. And so what this person was doing is can I say she?
Yeah,
I guess I will say she.
That's half the population.
That doesn't narrow it down too much.
Right. She was a title attorney in D.C. And what she was doing was she knew a bunch of people in Washington, D.C. that were elderly that owned their properties outright. Well, not only were they elderly and not own their properties outright, but they were getting close to the age of where they might pass on. So what she was doing was she was recording deeds of trust against their properties that they own outright, as if these folks were taking out loans, right?
Oh my gosh.
So she's recording a deed of trust so that what happened is she was getting their names notarized onto the deed of trust. She was recording the deed of trust, paying the deed of trust filing fees. Now, you might not think that's a big deal, but here's what happened. So she might be out $1,000, $2,000 for recording fees up front. But what happens is in the future, once this person dies, right, nobody knows about if they took out a loan or not. Then what ends up happening is once this property gets conveyed, the title search is going to show a deed of trust, and the final payoff has to be sent out to whatever lender lent the money. A final payoff request goes in. The loan that was never really actually made gets paid back.
Is she going as far as to forge the deed of trust document?
She's getting it notarized.
That was my question.
She's signing it and getting it notarized.
Does she notarize it herself?
Don't know that. Okay. Don't know that answer.
Well,
she's getting it notarized.
My first encounter with this person, we were working on another property. It was a multifamily property in the district, and we went to modify the loan. And what we found, and if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the taxes for the initial loan were never remitted to the city. And what she was doing was retaining those monies
and putting it in her pocket.
Wow.
But when we brought it to her attention and we're focused on it, then she said, "Oh, my mistake,"
and then paid it.
Right, and it just went away. But that was like a first indicator. Like you have an escrow account theoretically with money in it that you're to reconcile. I mean, at least annually, but it had been more than a year, but you need to do it more often, I think, to be a responsible business person. But anyhow, you have money in an escrow account, and you haven't paid it to the city to which it's owed. It's not that complex a process. You just send the money over.
That's right.
She hadn't done that, so that was pretty clear that she was on the scam side then.
Yeah, she was. Then
she converted it to a scheme, which was thinking, "Oh, what can I do? What can I do?" And the plan became an illegal plan, and that's where she forged people's names,
right?
And went ahead and recorded deeds of trust, and now she can't be found.
Now the thing about that is think about this for a second. If you got an elderly person who has maybe an heir or two, not too many heirs,
Oh
and
yeah,
that
they don't
property
know.
can be conveyed. They don't know.
These
They don't know
bozos
that,
who are
right.
inheriting stuff have no idea what's going on.
That's right. They don't know that Auntie took out a loan for $150,000
No
on a
way.
property that's worth $800,000.
No way.
They're not even thinking about that because, they're going to get $650,000 when that $800,000 property sells.
it.
They don't care. So they don't look into the fact that this loan might not be valid.
Wow.
Yep, sure.
Yeah.
Wow. This must be, I mean, one of our tax lien cases, somebody who's a squatter actually recorded a deed transferring the property from the original owner to her. And it looks a perfectly
Only
normal
problem
deed. It's
was
notarized. One problem.
What?
What was it, Sam?
What?
the person who signed the deed was dead at the time they signed it.
Oh, is that right?
For
Yeah.
like 30 years.
That's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem. That's a
that was a
problem.
red flag.
If they got him,
That's a
yeah, if
problem.
they
Red
got him to
flag.
sign.
Well,
Yeah,
no.
but it's interesting. This thing, it's up in Maine where I am at the moment. There was a big, I don't know if it was scandal or what you'd call it. There's a pretty significant rental tax up here, and there's a lot of rental properties. They call Maine vacation land, right? So a lot of rental management companies would collect whatever percent of the rental taxes and not send it to the state. And the state didn't have their act together to very quickly send out a notice to the actual owner saying, hey, you haven't paid any rental taxes and we know you're renting the property. So at some point, Maine sort of caught on to this and started going after these owners. And it was the owner that was on the hook because the rental company, they would just disappear or go bankrupt or whatever. And so it's the same thing about relying on somebody else to pay taxes. So the scammers out there must like this concept, and why
Yep.
it's important.
Yeah, and
We are
I
not
think
trying
that's
to.
another good example. And for us, I think that it works on a continuum, like you call it a scam, a scheme, a plan. What happens is it can go either way, right? You can go and reform it and make it a legal plan, but it can go backwards as well. And that's when you end up in court. We had a property we acquired at an auction, and the initial person's reaction, they were occupying the property. We thought it was vacant. We gave them an offer. They were going to accept it. And then they said, oh, okay, that could work. So now we're starting to work backwards. The plan is they're going to take money and they're going to vacate. But then they started thinking more about maybe we're going to do a scheme here. Maybe we're going to get a lawyer involved and we're going to get him to go out and ask for a lot more money. And so they went from a $10,000 request to, I don't know, $150,000, $100,000 court request right away. So we went from an agreement to now we have this. And then they were like, uh-oh, now we're making claims that we have rights here. And then they have to back it all the way up to a full scam. And now they're faking a lease. And Ed has to track down that the bottom notation on the lease indicates clearly that the lease was just recently generated, even though it's said to be many years old. And a variety of other unlawful untruthful statements to pursue an unlawful plan of holding on to that asset. And the result was that they backed themselves all the way up into a scam and then lost it.
Yeah,
Because
that's
they
interesting.
were lying the whole time.
Yep.
Instead of just
Well, and
participating more fully and honestly and making some money and moving along.
And the way we fixed that was I subpoenaed the internet company in Canada, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
not it's particularly simple process. And they're like, sure, we'll give you all the keystrokes and when they went in. It was amazing. They didn't care. They had a lawful subpoena. They were happy to comply. And they sent me a printout that absolutely, beyond doubt, they even had an affidavit. This is from our records. I could introduce it in court if we needed to go that far. But the
Yep.
reality is they went away. And that's why I hope we're being clear. We're not trying to teach people to do SSPs.
But you
We'd
got to
like you
look
to
for
do
them.
plans. You got to look for them because they are going to mess you up.
They
And
are.
and boy, subtle places. I had not heard about that with the wholesale thing. That's a very subtle, and you wouldn't necessarily catch that. And the other concern is okay, I'm honest. We try to be honest, but what if you're in that transaction as another party? What if you are the person who is the cash buyer who's paying the wholesaler and it shows up in the wrong place on the HUD? right? And so the wholesaler is trying to commit tax fraud.
Yeah.
Well, somebody you might think, I don't care, I'm not doing it, right?
Right.
But
Right.
I would tell any client, I would tell you guys, I mean, you know already, but to say, don't go do that because you could look like you're being sort of part of that scheme, or in that case, a scam to rip off the federal government. I do not want to be an accessory to a crime. So that's another reason is A, losing your money, but B, somebody, you've done it even innocently, but they think you were part of the scam. So
Yeah.
keep an eye out.
And then let's Sam. So let's wrap this up by telling one last story
Yeah.
about what you call the urbanized SSP with our squatter friends.
Yeah,
Tell me how that works.
So we find a house.
Oh,
We we buy the
you
tax
heard me
lien on it.
sigh.
We try to perfect the tax lien. We're effective at perfecting it in that we get title to the property, and yet the person who's protesting our ability to do that is presenting a deed that they didn't. Are we? I'm sorry. I'm not confusing our two.
You are.
I'm
Let's
sorry.
talk about
No,
the
no,
So I'm
it's the
sorry.
same
I'm
one.
sorry.
Talk about
All right,
the
back it up.
urbanized-
Okay, so the
the
urbanized plan.
the urbanized SSP
plan. We perfected deed,
and what the squatters
okay, so
do.
Let's go. You can wipe all that stuff out. So here we've got a house. We've perfected a tax lien deed, and I go to check on the house, thinking, oh, it's got a basement, it's got this and it's that,
And it's vacant.
and it's vacant. And I'm there with my contractor buddy, and we go up to the house, and a car drives up, and a couple people come out of it and start heading into the house. And the house is all boarded up, has no power, nothing like that, anything like that.
Do they have drywall buckets?
I don't know what.
Okay.
At that point, they might have had a bag of groceries. And I said, "Do you live here?" And the gentleman says, "I do, but you can talk to her because she owns it. She owns it." I said, "Have you heard of a tax sale on this or whatever?" And then it became clear they have keys to it. They're going in and they're squatting in the house. So they're squatting and making a stand that they have rights to be in the house. Now, they're not representing particularly clearly at this point whether they own it, whether they're leasing it, whether they're squatting in it. But now they're in it. We own the house. And we've just been this morning corresponding with landlord-tenant lawyers in the district, and they're saying 2+ years to get them out, even if they have no attachment to the house at all. The house is in blight, meaning that it's deferred maintenance. How much we can work on the house or not is governed by their willingness to allow us to work on our own house to get it out of blight. So the taxes are running high, and we're going to have to go down and present an offer to them. And that's where their scam comes in, because they're squatting and they know that they can drive all these costs into the system, and we're going to have to pay them cash to leave. And we're not talking like paying them $1,000. We're going to have to pay them a lot of money.
Yeah, and this is
Just
called
get up and go.
right. It's called a keys for cash agreement.
Yeah.
Right. So we're actually going to have to pay the squatters
Yeah.
money to leave.
Yeah.
And then they're going to end up finding another vacant property to move into.
Yeah.
So that the owner of that property will eventually offer them a keys for cash
Yeah.
as they're living for free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that is a scam.
That's
That backed all the way from a plan to a scheme to a scam.
But they're making money. Come on, they're making
they're
money. This
making
is
money.
great.
And the problem is to unwind it, right? Again,
Yeah.
we did nothing wrong. We followed all the rules to do the tax lien. There were no heirs, I believe, in this situation, and the property ended up getting title, but we're still stuck with dealing with this issue.
Yeah.
Some people might say, well, why don't you go there with a baseball bat, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we've heard people say that, and that is what's known as going to jail in the District of Columbia. If you
sure.
you try to intimidate somebody, you may feel your property rights have been stolen or whatever, but DC and most jurisdictions are pretty particular about due process.
Yeah, for sure.
Unfortunately, the due process that is due takes a long time in the district.
Yeah.
We will eventually win. The question is how long, and do we
in
lose by the time
places
we
where
win?
this has really been abused, they have changed laws to allow for more immediacy. But that's when someone occupies it and squats in the house, like in between the purchase and sale transaction, and they're clearly not the owner, and you just purchased it and they just arrived. You can move that faster through the
and this squatter
process. But
issue.
this squatter issues, in urban areas, it's
urban.
a big deal.
Right. It's a big deal. It happens in a lot of urban areas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, this has been well, like I said, I mean, this has been one of my favorite podcasts. I mean, I think when Ed, you brought up the term SSP, I've never forgotten about that, and I actually think this is a good little podcast on a scheme, a scam, or a scam, a scheme, and a plan. And sometimes these things work, but eventually, if you keep doing SSPs, you're going to get caught.
There you
So
go.
beware.
Right. Right. And try to make sure you're doing a plan out there. You don't want it. And people do accidentally. A plan actually is more like a scam because they didn't realize they were violating X or Y law. So things can happen innocently. Make sure you're in planned territory.
Yeah, there
It's
you go.
nice to make money without going to jail.
Yeah,
There you
try
go, for sure.
and try and make sure it's legal.
For sure.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
All
It's a
right.
wrap.